Just fucking do it. Subscribe now. It's funny. Truth is stranger than fiction. Did I answer your question? Or do you have another question? No. Yes, sir.
So when Andreas was talking about assets, did he talk about real estate as an asset or?
Well, no, he hasn't bought any real estate yet.
No, okay.
No. Andreas also listens. There's a big difference. I have two pools of mentee, students, whatever you want to call yourselves. The ones that listen 100%. There's one that listen like they're gonna. Remember, I said it's like a Chinese menu. I take a little Szechuan soup, it's a potpourri, and you pick and choose. And then the ones that don't listen at all. And the ones that don't listen at all are normally the ones that ask the most questions. So, ergo, then, Dan, why do they ask the questions? That's a whole other thing. I could give a whole fucking seminar on that. If they ask so many goddamn questions, why don't? But anyway. And you know the answer. Thank you. As you woof your whiskey down, see, reality's starting to kick into some of these people. Now, I haven't forgotten, you had a question early on. Okay, thank you. Okay. When you get out there, when you make your first cold call, that's what your response is going to be. That's what your response is going to be. Anything else about Andreas? Yes, sir, Doc.
He said at some point that he was not able to get money out of the business until maybe October because...
No, so far, other than paying... Now, see, none of his fees got delayed because the first deal cratered, but that was 100% seller finance, but it cratered. And so from deal 2 on, they all closed, so that means you owe them the money. The downside of closing the deals right away is you got to pay the goddamn lawyers and accountants because the deal that you had with them, if you want to honor the agreement, and that's what I tell you to do, honor the agreement, we rolled fees on a deal that does not happen. But when you do the deals and you close the deals, then you owe the goddamn money. Another agreement is, well, I don't want to pay you any fees for 6 months, or I don't want to pay. They won't agree to that, or they're not likely to agree to that. But his deals have closed, and so the people that you've heard so far have already paid their lawyers and accountants, or they're in the process of paying their lawyers and accountants because their deal's closed. So that's good news. That setup of delayed fees is, you're trying something new. The odds are that it may not close, and so we're giving you some cushion that you don't have to be concerned about having to write checks for $50, $80, $120,000 that you may or may not have. Most of you don't have it. Some of you do. And so he hasn't paid. But starting October 1, which is already passed now, 5 weeks, they're getting a salary. He and the CFO are drawing a salary, and the salary is, and it's a German structure. I don't particularly like the structure because the Germans like to keep the reins on you. And so I think it's reviewed quarterly, performance against budget, which is kind of a normal deal. But they can double or triple their salary between now and December. These deals close. But in the beginning, when you don't have any money or you're scratching around like a chicken for some seed on the ground, these things are more important. But in Andreas' cases, he closed the deals. So when you close the deals, don't expect the lawyers and the accountants not to want to be paid. They're right there in the food line. Normally the lawyers shove the accountants out of the way so they can get their tray to get the food first. But you shouldn't mind paying them. You've been able to use their name, which is big, which is powerful, which is big. It's a lot better than your name for sure. So you're using their name and leverage in conjunction with your directors, dream team's name, and that's powerful. It certainly is. And then to a greater extent, the banks see the accountant's name, they see the lawyer's name, they see all these prestigious people that you don't have to explain about. They want to get on board. And again, I like to poke fun at it. They forget your name. Really? Who? What? Where did this deal come from? But now, as Andrea said, banks are calling them. And that happens. And then it becomes not as, well, it's not as good as Jason Nagy, because Jason Nagy's done a lot more deals than Andreas. But when they start calling you, then, I mean, it's like in the snooker room in the tower, which we don't let you in anymore. But a pinball machine, we have an antique pinball machine, and you pull the lever back, and the ball goes up into the pinball thing, and every time it hits something, a light goes off, and you get points. Well, that's where Jason is now. I mean, everything he's touching now is turning into money, loans, deals, and then that's when it becomes, as Sally would say, the most fun. But if you don't manage them right, and you've heard Marcus bitch. In current stock, I don't have anybody more successful than Marcus. But that's a whole other story. Every morning I get up, who stole 100,000 euros from me? Well, I would say, but Marcus, you've got millions of euros that they could steal. So if they're only stealing 100,000, you should just count yourself fortunate. But that's the good news. But every problem will be replaced with another problem. And you learn to deal with them. And in the beginning, you don't know how to deal with them necessarily, but your dream team does. And if they don't, guys and gals, you got the wrong guys and gals on there. Or some, if they say no, they don't want to be involved, then you still got the wrong guys and gals. But for the most part, they support you. And it's a lot easier for these guys to support you when they see money coming through the door than when it's just an idea on a executive summary that you're going to dominate the industry. So you say. But once you start, then they're terrific. They're terrific. And as I told you, I only lost one director, and he died in the 9.5 years that I was at the helm. And because they were making money. And as I read you this morning, Salvatore, they made millions. And 98% of them remember where the money came from. You. There's always 2% that will forget how they got there. But that doesn't happen. And of course, the more money you make, the more they remember. Occasionally, you have to remind them. But Andres is doing terrific. He's doing a super job, and now he's doing this full time, and I'm sure he's running towards the gunfire, and of course now he's tasted success. Just like Simon Bell, I always knew I was going to do it, but I thought maybe I wasn't going to do it. Maybe I bit off more than I can chew. And that's normal, but you got to keep that back. You got to keep that thought process and the affirmations and the goals. And this afternoon when we're talking about affirmations and goals, with affirmations and goals, I mean that allows you to quell those thoughts. Anything else about Andreas? Yes, ma'am.
Just a general question. The time that
is this a general coming from a Vietnamese general or what do you mean?
It's Scotland.
Oh, Scotland. Remember, sailor boy, hike that skirt. Never mind, go ahead.
So the time that he started talking to the sellers with the negotiation, is that he has to involve the board every time? Or
No. Remember, the board gave him permission. You can go run and shoot deals up to 10 million. And that's a terrific point for a different reason. That's exactly why I didn't want him to be limited to €1 million. Because in the beginning, he hasn't done shit. Why are we giving him 10 million? In theory, he could go to a bank, borrow 10 million and run. In theory. And unfortunately, I had, which I've already mentioned a few, that have done exactly that. Okay. But now that he's done deals, when we do it the next time, I'm going to recommend to the board that we up it from 10 million to 20 or 25 million, which the Germans will get nervous a little, and they'll want they want to put an ankle bracelet on him or something that he doesn't leave Germany. I'm exaggerating because maybe some of the board members are watching it. Of course, we trust Andres. We're not going to be putting any ankle bracelet on him. But, and again, these guys aren't the most successful. They're the ones that will talk to us. And just as I'm hoping, from my lips to Allah's ears, 2 or 3 or more of you are giving these webinars 6-8 months from now, because you've done this. And then once you've done it, you will have shoved all the negative thought that you might have now. You won't recall any of that. They tell me after childbirth, childbirth's a bitch, but after childbirth, the women forget the pain of childbirth, and they just look at the little shithead, Google. And that's not dissimilar to this program. Once you've done deals, you forget the pain that you've gone through. And most of it's emotional pain, not physical pain. But anything else about, yes, sir?
So if for some reason for the second or third deal, you can get the bank to finance the whole deal, is it better than the seller's finance or no?
Well, you can't, I'm going to answer that in a different way. There's no rule or law that says you can go from seller finance to bank finance to seller finance, and some of the banks, whether you said it on purpose or not, the banks will finance it 100%. It's not just the fucking sellers. See, Doc, even a blind fucking surgeon will, step on a bar of gold every once in a while. It's a great point because banks do finance these deals 100%. Not the first deal. So you want the choice, as does Marcus, although Marcus doesn't want to fuck with sellers finance because the sellers have always got their questions. The banks will finance it 100%. And the challenge is, I don't want you to cross-collateralize. In other words, we do this deal with 3 different banks. No problem. But we do this deal, and then this deal we do 2 banks. And you're going to take both those deals and you're going to want to cross-collateralize them. You're going to want each deal to guarantee against the other deal. We don't want to do that. We want them separate and stand alone. So in the beginning, you want deal, bank, all separate. But then at some point, as Marcus has found out, you've got 15 banks and you do 300 deals. You're going to go back to the same bank. And as soon as you go back to that bank, they're going to lick their chops, and they're going to say, well, because you're going to list all your financial assets, and it's not going to be an Iranian deal. You're going to be honest and list all the financial assets. They're licking their chop because they see all those transactions and all those assets, and they're going to want all of them. They're going to start, just as we start with 100% seller finance, they're going to start with, we want 100% of all your deals. And then they promise you some bullshit that they're going to give you better service, which is bullshit, and so they give you a better rate, so 25 basis points, so what? Then they give you tickets to the World Cup and all that crap that you didn't know existed. But so you want to keep it separate as long as you can. At some juncture, Amazon, I'm sure, their lines of credit, their overdrafts are collateralized, cross-collateralized against all their assets. I'm sure. Well, let's worry about it when we're Amazon. Let's worry about it when we're Amazon. But that will come. That will come. There will be a general guarantee obligation against all of it. Within that holding company, not all the other shit you've got. Because that's where they start. Because right now, in that holding company, there's nothing but your good name, more or less, or goodwill. So, but that's down the road. And we used to threaten, well, I'll leave the bank. We'll go to another bank. And you can only make that threat once or twice. And then when you don't do it, they know you're not going to do it. Because it takes a big effort. When you've been doing banking for 5 or 10 years with one bank, and you've got, 1,000 employees and paychecks and all this crap, and then I'm going to leave the bank. And then your controller, your treasurer, your CFO will shit, because they know what a hassle it is to change banks. So, but I used to put all our business up for valuation of audit fees every 3 or 4 years. To get, we've been with you, because audit fees and your commercial fees will go up automatically when you're with somebody a long time. It's like the credit cards that you never look at what the interest rate is, but it's always going up. So we bring in, at that time it was the big 8, and then the big 6, and then the big 4. We bring all the accountants in, accounting firms. We use one, and sometimes the second one. We bring all 4 in to bid on the business for the next 3 years. And of course, the people that have been good to you, they say, we've been good to you, Dan. Why are you bringing these other assholes in to bid against us? Because we're just going to keep you honest. And so then the auditor that at that time says, we'll cut the audit fees $1 million. Don't you want to come? No, we'll cut the audit fees $1 million. Well, if they can cut the audit fees $1 million without looking at the fucking papers, I'm paying too much. But they will. That's rather than compete, because some of the big firms will say, we'll lose business on the first year or 2. We'll do the audit fees for nothing. And your current auditors that have been good to you, that brought you along back when you were in the gutter, and I've seen them beg like this, when you had nothing, But ABC, our big firm, will do it for nothing, just to get your business, to show you that our heart's in the right place. The heart that you don't possess, Mr. Peña, we'll show you, we'll do the fees. And so, but it's not about fees, it's about top-line revenue. That's the most important thing. And don't ever don't lose sight of that. Any other questions about, yes, sir?
So the non-cross-collateralized security, are the loans being made at the holding company level or at the subsidiary?
Okay, let me go through that now. Okay. Except for Germany, because they have a separate system. They have a supervisory board and the rest of the free world for the most part. You set up a company, this is your holding company. It's not what it says. Fucking jerk. That's our holding company, okay? And the holding company can be set up, and some of you have set up companies. You can set up a company for $100 or $50 or $75 online. That's not what I'm talking about, that. You have a regular holding company, and your lawyers, your corporate lawyers, remember, that are going to be at your first board meeting, along with your accountants and your board members, they will have already discussed the tax ramifications. What are the odds of you really wanting to go public, Mr. Jones? What are the odds of you really selling as opposed to going to a strategic seller down the road, your exit? So you figure out what are the probabilities, which is the best structure for you. And let's just say that it's a limited liability company, okay, in America, or the equivalent thereof, where else? They have equivalent there's of limited liability companies. And we decide we're going to go to Delaware. Why are we going to go to Delaware? Well, Delaware has the most case law, favorable case law for the company than any other state in the union. Now there's 5 or 6 other states that approach it. It used to be Nevada, but Nevada used to have a bad be smirched because of the gangsters, but that's gone now. Wyoming, Nevada, Delaware. So we decided on a Delaware corporation. So the shares of the holding company are going to be a Delaware corporation. You're going to buy acquisition number 1, and you anticipate to make a lot of acquisitions. Okay. So the first acquisition number 1, is wholly owned by your holding company, the Delaware Corporation. That acquisition may have share ownership from the sellers, the docs, if it's a doc deal, or sometimes to get somebody over the line, they don't want to say, well, how about you believe in the dream, you sell them on the dream, we'll give you 2% of the holding company or 1% of the holding company. Now, we did a deal last year when he's about 99% of the stock. And I wanted to know why in the fuck, because we had a secretary that had got 1% 9,000 years ago, and she didn't want to sell. I want to be part of the, so she stayed. She stayed, which sometimes that happens. Sometimes there'll be a young doc, referring to your kind of deal, that doesn't want out. So there are reasons, but normally you're buying 100% of the subsidiary. And that 100% is going to be owned by ABC Holding Company, or NewCo as they call them. Now you might make acquisition 2, 3, 4, blah, blah, blah. You got 10 acquisitions. 99 times out of 100, all those shares of all those 10 subsidiaries are going to be owned by NewCo. NewCo. Now, who owns NewCo? You, if you follow the steps, I'm going to start crying, you own about 60, 65%. And the rest of the board, as I've explained till I'm blue in the fucking face, owns the other 35%. Everybody with me? Okay, now, those subsidiaries aren't your acquisition vehicles. The acquisition vehicle is the holding company. But sometimes shit happens, and subsidiary number 1 or 3 or 5 will make an acquisition below in a next rung of ownership. That's fine, because at the end of the day, 100% is still owned by the holding company. By the holding company. Now, those subsidiary companies don't have to be Delaware corporations. Normally, they're the corporation. You buy a Texas company. You buy a Kentucky company. You buy California, God forbid, you buy a California company. You buy these companies, and so they may not be, in fact, it's not rare, but it probably 50% of the time, they won't be Delaware companies, but it doesn't matter because they were incorporated under the state law wherever they're normally doing business. Like if you're in New Mexico, I'm not really familiar with New Mexico state law, but let's just say it's a New Mexico company. Then when we always prepare as if we're going to sell and or go public, so you want to prepare the companies by having strict adherence to GAAP, general accepted accounting principles. So when you do sell, so you're getting ready for audit even though you're not selling. So at the end of the year, they'll do consolidated financials, consolidated balance sheet, consolidated income statement, consolidated everything, and it'll filter up to what the holding company did. So when the holding company reports assets of X, it'll be a combination of all the subsidiaries, companies below. When they have a consolidated income statement, it'll be the consolidation of all the income statements below. Now, first time out, you will borrow against the first acquisition company because that's the assets, that's the company, that's the revenue stream you're buying. And what you want to refrain from doing is as you put more assets and more assets like Marcus did, or has successfully for the last 10, 11 years, is you don't want them to guarantee the others. And they will fight and scratch like crazy because then they will feel less at risk that if something goes wrong, they know they're going to be able to get the money somewhere down the chain. And you don't want that. You don't want that. And occasionally, you do what you have to do, but I mean, you can almost always get around that. And your in-house accountant, your in-house lawyer, your CFO, especially those three, will know how you keep from that happening. Now, occasionally, so now at the end of 2-3 years, you've got audited financials for the holding company with a big accountant's name, and you can use just that to go borrow off of, because they'll look at the consolidated balance sheet and they'll say, oh, fuck, you got $25 million in equity? And anybody worth their salt ought to be able to at least borrow 1 to 2 times their net equity, or book value is another way of saying it, book value. But that's down the road. That's down the road. But you start with the holding company, and you own 65% of it. And as long as you have 50.1%, you're in control. You're in control. Now, we've had some of the pendejos, brainless meathead kids, somehow they can't add. And then it's Dan Penna's fault. He didn't, which is bullshit. But I mean that they get diluted down below 50%. Or they depend on their brother-in-law, who's got 15% and they have 40%, and they, nothing better than a brother-in-law selling you down the river, believe me. And so, 50.1. Not 51, forget 50.1, 51, just in case, you make a mistake with a decimal point. You and or your personal entity. My stuff isn't a personal voting trust, but I mean you. And I know for those of you that are married or have significant others, that I know they tell you they're going to support you. I know you want to believe that, but I keep 51 in your name. Call me cynical. But as soon as you catch your husband in bed with, all of a sudden, adios. I mean, all of a sudden that sweet partnership that you thought you had ends in tears. And it's almost always that the woman, if it's a husband and wife, catches the husband. Only once or twice in 50 years have it been the other way. Where the women cheat on. I know they cheat, but I mean where they're caught and it becomes a corporate battle. It's normally the guy can't keep his dick in his pants, which every man in this room can, at some level, relate to that. At some level, can relate to that. Okay, did I answer that question? Was there another question about that? Now, YouTube, we're going to turn off the thing now, and I don't want to leave you out, but we're going to leave you out. Because now the real shit is going to be discussed. The difference between men and boys, women and little girls. And you're not going to hear it. Bye-bye.